right, well, welcome back to Brass Tactics. I'm Joe McGiffin, and with me today is Pete Mitchell.
As always.
Unfortunately, not sure if Matt's going to be able to join us this evening or not, but that is okay,
That's right.
because we picked a really boring topic to talk to you about this week.
Well,
Well,
don't tune off before you even start the episode.
it's cool if you're in the know, and after this episode, you sure will be. And what was that topic again, Pete?
CJADC.
CJADC2, yes. This is going to be our inaugural Buzzword week here at Brass Tactics. And the big one we're going to talk about today is CJAD-C2, Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control.
Learn your awesome acronyms with Brass Tactics.
I'm going to see if I can do something with that soundbite. So Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control. Pete, what does that mean?
What it sounds like to me is, how do you get the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps to all talk to each other while engaged in an operation?
Yeah, you're almost right.
What did I miss?
You missed the first C.
Oh, command.
Combined.
Oh, combined. Oops.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
just no. So it was actually JAD-C2 until a few months ago when they put the extra C in front of it. So breaking this down, we're going to start with the back of it. C2. C2 is one of the most common acronyms. We've probably accidentally used it a few times on this podcast, I'm sure. But C2 stands for Command and Control. And that is exactly like the warfighting function for command and control that is so important to maintaining unity of command. One of those principles that you need in order to be effective in war.
The idea of having all the forces, having one guy responsible for it.
Yep, unified command. So command means you're the buck stops there. You have the supreme authority. Control usually means something short of command, where you tell people what to do and then they go do it, as opposed to you tell people what to do and then you lead them while they're doing it. That last one is command. That first one is control. And so we also kind of use it to refer to the systems themselves. So the computer systems and other networks are C2 networks, the ways you communicate with your folks.
Historical parallel to this would be message runners, like guys you literally get a letter to send to a subordinate commander, or flags, smoke, any way you get messaging across the battlefield. So even armies had C2 nodes. They were just relatively more simple.
Yeah. And so now we just keep adding C's to it because we fancy like that. So C3 refers to your command and control as well as your communications. And then your C4 can refer to either Pete's plastic explosive from the video game he referenced at the end of last episode, or command. Counter-Strike, that's what. Mm-hmm. Command, control, communications, and computer networks. C4. But anyway, going back to C2. So C2 is command and control. So that's how to talk to people. All domain. Add C2. So out of CJAD-C2, we're working our way back 2 letters at a time. All domain command and control means, all right, you've got satellites in space. Those need to communicate with ships on the sea or combatants on the ground in order to share information, right? So
break it down even more. So a domain, remember, is the medium in which conflict can occur. So there's 5 of them now: air, land, sea, cyberspace, and space.
Yep. So all domain means sending a message through all 5, or the potential to share information across all 5. And so you might start with satellite imagery of a bad guy's location. Well, that's fun, but first you need a commander to receive that information and to decide what to do about it. Do we just keep it under surveillance, or do we go blow it up? Let's say the commander decides to blow it up. Well, the commander is probably not going to do that themselves. They're probably going to dispatch a drone. And so you now need to communicate from the satellite to your command node out to one of your drones to go and blow that up. If there's a high-value target in there you want to kidnap, you might need to send in a SEAL team as well. And so it's infinitely more complicated. But The big hang up here, as Pete referenced earlier, and this is where the JAD comes in for this JADC2, is joint, right? Each domain, the way we are structured in the United States, every branch of our military is responsible for a different domain. And all of our military branches have their own budgets to decide what their equipment needs are, which is great because it leaves the Army deciding what's best for the Army, the Navy deciding what's best for the Navy, but it also has this severe drawback, right? Where you're not necessarily prioritizing things that are important for both the Army and the Navy. And so because of that, our C2 systems kind of lag. We have some workarounds and some other patchwork things to get around it, but like at a fundamental level, the encryption systems used by Army radios are not the same as what used for the Air Force. And so you need these mediums to translate in between. And the more sophisticated you talk about, the more ridiculous some of these loopholes gets. Like at some point, you can have somebody in a classified information facility who is taking reports out of an Air Force computer on one end and then having to manually type those same reports into an Army computer that is stationed right next to that Air Force computer. We're working on algorithms and have some algorithms that help get around these things, but it can be a significant issue a lot of the time. And so joint all domain command and control is trying to build a network where immediately upon seeing something, an Air Force jet or a Space Force satellite can register a threat and immediately tell the nearest by shooter, right? So this sensor can alert the nearest shooter, whether that's an Army missile silo pod thing or a naval battleship or aircraft carrier. It tells whatever the nearest by most efficient asset to use, where the threat is, and can instantaneously cause it to trigger, to immediately fire it. So it is the most effective kill chain where you sense something and shoot something as fast as you possibly can with no need for intermediaries and overlaps. And the reason that this is going to be so fast is because of artificial intelligence and machine learning. You have computers that are aiding all of this decision making process. So you don't actually need to wait for a human to be looking at a satellite feed to say, oh, that's a problem. You have a computer thing saying, okay, this looks like a problem. That then alerts a human and also alerts the shooter and waiting for that commander to make a decision. And so that's where Pete was almost right, but we left off this last C. This last C is combined. Now there's a fundamental difference between the way the military uses the terms combined and joint. Joint refers to our joint forces. So US military assets. Combined is the word we use when we're talking about US joint forces in combination with partners and allies. So this concept, this joint all domain command and control battle network is extremely ambitious because we're saying not only will we share information instantaneously and very effectively with our entire organic military, but we need the capability to ensure our partners and allies can leverage this asset as well.
Boy, that'd be nice to have, wouldn't it?
You know, you sound like a couple different congressmen, honestly.
Tell me it's one of the smart ones.
Oh, I honestly don't follow politics as closely as I ought to. Shame
Mm.
on me. But yeah, like as Pete's cynicism suggests, this is very ambitious. How close are we to this? It's hard to answer that question because we don't want other people to know.
And also, unless you're really in the know and doing this isn't like a new tank or a stealth bomber,
No.
right? This is something. It's very nuggetory and it's flat out boring. And unless you're using it, you're not even going to know it's there.
Yeah. It's it's not particularly glamorous. It's a big buzzword because it's completely tied to the army or the military's optimization, their effective use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so to that end, it's really just hard to tell how much progress is being made. Would you care to, Pete,
Yeah.
trivia wise,
Mm.
how many different programs are there that are directly related to JADC2 or CJADC2?
That I'm familiar with. Or do you just want me to guess? Because I have no idea. Because it's a system of systems, isn't it? Is
Yep.
that the term we
So
use?
so like we were just talking about, right? Each service has their own budget.
Right.
So each service is also working on their own piece of this pie.
So there's at least 6 right there.
Not quite, because I think JADC2 in origin is technically a little bit older than Space Force, but
So
Space Force is
they
like,
could piggyback off the Air Forces. That's fine.
yeah, same
So
with the Marine Corps.
same with
The
the Marines. Okay,
Marines,
so then there's at least 4
yes,
separate systems that we're talking about here.
the Marines have actually come out and said that they don't actually have a portfolio program for it, but they've said in news releases that they are in fact working on it. But they're arguably the most skeptical service of this ever getting off the ground.
They're a deeply pragmatic bunch, the
No,
U.S.
they
Marine
are.
Corps.
He's like, honestly, we have communication issues talking Marine to Marine, let alone Marine to Navy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this project is very ambitious. Nobody's disagreeing that it's extremely critical to national security.
The other, and don't forget the other thing too is that when you make this kind of a completely interlinked system sharing encryption, it makes penetrating this system that much more profitable. Because now instead of just penetrating, say, just the Army or just the Navy's communicate, now you have access to all 5 services.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge downside. Hopefully, with quantum computing and other nerd stuff, we can prevent that. But
I
all
mean, that's
right,
what
so
Urban's bit about Enigma too. I'm just saying, man, all it takes is one leak. And it doesn't matter how good your quantum encryption is. If they have the key, doesn't good matter how good your lock is, dude.
all right, so easy trivia mode, Pete. Do you
Okay.
know what
Well,
the Army's piece of JADC2 is? What our
um,
project is?
oh, are you asking me the acronym?
No, it's not an acronym. It's just a
Oh.
cool word. It's Project fill in the blank.
Oh no, nuts. I knew Jedi was the cloud
It,
computing acronym.
it's
That was cool.
it's easily the most public of any of the CJAD C2 portfolio.
You've actually got me stumped because I don't pay attention to this stuff. I have no clue.
Convergence.
Project
Project
Convergence.
Convergence.
Oh, that's a
Yes.
very bold name.
So they've run, I think for the past 3 years now, they've run an annual joint or combined exercise, and they try out a new widget each time. And so it looks really cool. I think one of the issues, though, is that it's really easy to integrate all of the new technologies that literally just got developed, because then you've baked in the requirement for all domain cross compatibility into its like network. But all the legacy stuff, all the older fighters, tanks, Bradleys, and ships, trying to get that into the new age, into the digitalized AI, ML enabled JADC2, I think that's where a lot of the problem is. Because shooting coastal artillery missiles that are using or painting their trajectories based off of Navy sensor arrays, that's pretty easy because we came up with all of that and then just built it. But like making the Patriots integrate with, I don't know, like Starlink based satellite arrays, I think that's where a lot of the problems are. So Project
Hmm.
Convergence is where everybody tests pretty much all their new toys. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. It's combined and joint. I think the last iteration was the actual combined one. So the Air Forces is called the Advanced Battle Management System, or ABMS. And so this is one of those things that's supposed to go into like the F-35 or whatever's going to come next, the next generation air dominance battle platform, or NJAD.
Yep.
There's going to be a widget in there that can make satellites talk flawlessly to ground forces, similar to the flying planes that have like banks of radio de-encryptors in them in order to make our Singar's radio talk to Air Force
Mhm.
radios. The Navy's is the most secretive, and it's called Project Overmatch. I think most speculation is that it involves a lot of drones, surface and subsurface drones, but again, the Navy is playing this one pretty close to the chest. And then on top of that, you have the fully networked FNC3, fully networked command, control, and communications from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense. You have the 5G information communications technologies run by DoD's Chief Information Officer. And then the last piece, which is the one I'm most partial to, I think it's really fascinating, is called mosaic warfare. And that is actually in development at the Defense Advanced Research something agency.
DARPA
DARPA. Yes. What's the P?
projects.
The Advanced Research Projects Agency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mosaic warfare is developed by DARPA. And I could spend the rest of this episode and next episode talking about how cool it is.
What we know about it, at least.
Yeah, well, honestly, I don't even know that much about it. I can just tell you about the implications of it because it will completely revolutionize warfare.
All right.
Anyways, let's
Oh,
pause.
you're just playing on top of that. You can't just say it's going to completely revolutionize warfare and then not tell me at least a little bit about it.
Okay, well, fine. Let's start here then. And before you answer this question,
Yes.
I will punch you if you quote Sun Tzu at me.
Oh, that really took the wind out of my sails.
What is all warfare based on?
Oh,
It's not deception. It is sort of deception. We'll circle back to it. He's not wrong.
Are you going to say good communication? You sound like my wife.
No.
Okay.
Why are you and your wife at war? That
We're
does
not.
not
No,
sound
we're
like a
just
healthy
based
relationship.
on good communication. I would say okay, fine. Okay, then if
Like,
you
how do you win a war in a Clausewitzian sense, if you will?
violence.
Violence perpetrated on whomst?
On whomst the enemy to force him to do your will?
What specifically?
His centers of gravity?
Okay.
I'm fishing here.
Well, I mean more generally than that. I was thinking more his trinity.
So his trinity is the his army, his people, and his territory.
Yeah, and of those three, which one is usually the most touchable?
The army.
Yes, attritional warfare, right?
Right.
You basically keep going to war until somebody runs out of dudes to put on the battlefield to war with, right?
Right. And you crack the sorry. And the people also encompasses the will of the people, not just their bodies.
Yes,
So
it does.
you grind the army and then you crack the will and then you occupy the territory.
Yep. And he's like, you want to make sure somebody's good and conquered, you got to get all three. But if you just want to win a war, you can usually just scuff their army up real good. And that the premise of that is generally referred to as attritional warfare, where armies go against armies until one army can no longer go. They've been attrited to a point where they cannot continue.
Well, I mean, I would counter because that's also the goal of maneuver warfare. You're just not trying to grind them. You're trying to cut them off and then force them to surrender.
Yeah, well, all warfare. Pretty much all warfare. Yeah. So
what you're saying, and all warfare is based on destroying the enemy's army. Is that what you're kind of looking for?
No, because I do think Sun Tzu was right. Ultimately, all warfare is based on deception. I didn't want you to start there facetiously because then we would have spent an extra 5 minutes before getting to the attritional warfare.
Why not instead just like hit me with that good old Starship Troopers, man, and be like, you're using violence and force, the supreme authority from which all other authorities are derived?
No, because I don't really believe that because Sun Tzu makes it pretty clear that the acme of strategy is to not have to use that.
Yeah, but he also talks about Shi, and like the idea is when I see Sun Tzu, right, and he's talking about the deception.
You're going to feel really silly when Qi ends up becoming an extremely important part of strategic dogma in the next 50 years, because this is
an important part of strategic dogma, though. It's smart. It's putting your enemy into a position where you can smash him with the minimum amount of effort.
Yeah, but he's saying the best generals don't even need to have to smash them ever with any effort.
Well, that's because the enemy knows that if they resist, they'll be crushed, and so they just surrender.
That's my point.
Threat of violence is still there. You still have to have the.
I'm not saying the threat of violence isn't there. I'm saying that for all of human history, for the most part, including Sun Tzu, arguably, because Sun Tzu's idea of winning without fighting is largely, or used to be considered largely unattainable. Advances like Siege 2 and Mosaic Warfare completely upend that assumption that all warfare is attritional, because you can win just by having better computers. And so this is from a think tank that I'm quite partial to, the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessment, CSBA, a few years back, did a piece about Mosaic Warfare. And in it, the authors advocated that attritional warfare is a paradigm that will no longer serve. And instead, we needed to start thinking about decision-centric warfare.
Okay.
Now, what is decision-centric warfare?
Well, if it's the opposite of attritional warfare,
It's not Clausewitzian.
yeah, it sounds very
It's
Sun
Sun
Tzuian.
Tzu.
Yeah,
It's
it
very yeah,
Sun
it's
Tzuian.
exactly what it sounds like. It's all warfare is based off of deception. If somebody like China has another fun acronym here, anti-access area denial, or A2AD.
Mhm.
So part of why we're so concerned about our technology being outdated is because China is able to cast this very terrifying bubble all around itself, its first island chain, or nine dash line as it's often called, which is largely the South China Sea. And basically, they can sink anything that we put into those waters before anything we have has a chance to respond. They can do this with missiles,
Right.
with very stealthy submarines, and then they also have been setting up mines using fishing trawlers that have been quote unquote deputized into the
Mhm.
military, or just being used with subterfuge. And so they've created this bubble that makes it very hard to access. Hence the name anti-access and area denial. This system relies on very sophisticated sensors, satellites and radar and things like that in order to identify threats and take them out.
Mhm.
In
And it
attritional,
also know it based on, as you would say, knowing your enemy, right?
yeah, and China crafted this A2AD to be the exact thing that our carrier group task force based maritime fleets are extremely vulnerable to. It was very clever of them. Now, it's still thinking in terms of attrition, right? So now we're trying to think how can we force things onto land in order to get through that? How much is that going to cost us? How much is that of that fleet is going to are we going to lose? If you switch the paradigm up to decision centric warfare is not thinking like Clausewitz. You don't actually have to destroy some of these things. You just have to destroy their ability to communicate. You have to destroy their C2. And so, how does decision centric warfare work? Well, one way is you can spam the ever loving snot out of their sensors. Because
Mhm.
if there's too much distortion and interference on their sensor from, I don't know, like cardboard drones, for example, or even if you can just spoof signatures onto their radar or their other sensor arrays, then they don't know where the real threat is to them. You've essentially blinded them. You've taken away that advantage. You can do this through a number of different ways. Similarly, you can go really low cost. Instead of putting inexpensive carrier group battleships, destroyers, submarines, and task force carrier thingies, you can just use a whole bunch of inexpensive autonomous or semi autonomous or at least unmanned drones that just float on the sea because then you don't care if they're sending a $100,000 coastal based missile at your $3,000 toy boat. That's pretty much a win. You are going to drain them financially because they cannot figure out where the real threat is. And so they are forced to essentially waste their assets or they're put into a state of decision paralysis because you have essentially isolated their ability to command or control. And so decision centric warfare is literally the acme of a general skill to win without fighting. It's
Mhm.
crazy. So we've come full circle. We finally are moving past Clausewitz, something that I've complained about quite often.
Well, I don't know because it may address the how of the war, but not the why. I mean, the why of the war is still ultimately grounded in political thought, right?
Oh, and I don't think he's wrong. I think warfare is everything's an extension of politics if you want to phrase it like that though.
No, no. Well,
But
Michel Foucault would agree with you on that point as well. I mean, it's like a philosophical truth at this point. It's
yeah.
no one got that. I don't know if Clausewitz himself does not advocate for attritional warfare, though. I don't
So I to be fair, I don't think he really advocates anything.
type of warfare.
He's just
He's
an
not.
observer.
Yeah, and also he
Everything he
doesn't finish
says is
the book.
descriptive.
He doesn't finish the book, and if he had, maybe he would have, but we
No,
don't know.
I don't. And like my fault, as I've said before, my complaints are less with Clausewitz and more with his wife and
Yeah.
people who only half read the thing that he half wrote. Oh, I need to write that down somewhere. I'm very proud of that one.
Mhm.
Half read the thing he half wrote. But yeah, but I mean, because he's not wrong, because warfare has been attritional for pretty much all of recorded history. This is just how wars were fought.
Mhm.
But the more we introduce non-human elements, specifically artificial intelligence and autonomous weapons and autonomous platforms, so basically robots, the more opportunities are being created to be exploited. And so that's the basic premise of decision centric warfare right there. Rather than targeting their assets themselves, you're targeting their ability for their assets to communicate with each other effectively.
Mhm.
And by essentially spamming their communications, their command and control systems, you're able to actually close with and destroy them.
And on that bombshell,
Are we done already? That's disappointing.
yeah, I thought that was pretty good. No, I think you should
Yeah,
save this for part 2, honestly. I think you should make
um,
2 bite-sized. I think you should do
maybe.
bite-sized.
I think a part 2 for this one would benefit from a good case study and then speculation on how China how a war with China and the
Yeah.
US might go down.
You wanna talk Ghost Fleet?
I'd have to read it first.
I mean, we're not gonna have to read I mean, just freaking read the synopsis. You don't have to read the whole book.
Maybe. It's been on the list to read,
Yeah.
but
I might read it on my flight. I fly out tomorrow. I might check it out.
where are you going?
Berlin for the Military History Conference, presenting on the interwar reforms at the academies
Oh
with twins
gosh.
here in Germany.
I didn't realize that was so soon. Actually,
I
no,
know.
you didn't actually talk about that.
Just because I don't like bragging about what I'm doing.
Well, congratulations. When did you submit this one?
Oh, this was back in March. I've been working this
Did
for a while.
what was this piece?
This is examining interwar, so examining curriculum reform at West Point and the German Kriegsschulen in the 20s and 30s.
All right. Well, do we have a topic for next week?
I don't know. I'll
Well,
be.
anyways, thank you for joining us.
We could talk the conference I was too. We could do interwar part 2. I could bring up some of the more interesting things.
Sure. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. If you have a topic that you guys want us to talk about next, we are open to it. If not, we will hear about Pete's trip to Germany.
We're open all night.
Please leave us a review, preferably a good one. Please tell your friends about us. Spread word of mouth if you think we're doing some good stuff here that other people might want to listen to,
Mm-hmm.
because we'd love to talk to them.
Yes, we do. We're
And
friendly.
yeah, hopefully we will see you all next week.
Bye.